Yeah, I don't consider myself necessarily to be a journalist, but as someone who cares and operates sort of within the space and has got a real, passion, a real, I guess, spiritual obligation towards drug reform, given the life that I've lived and continue to lead. The demise of Vice recently and their kind of really unique form of journalism. I think you guys can step in somewhere into a space to cover that. And I think that's what you're doing by doing it. Vice showed that journalism is still protected in most spaces. Again, for all of its censorship and whatever else, there's a difference between being at a space and reporting on a crime and being an accessory to said crime. And I think more and more people have an appetite. They're almost insatiable. I don't know if you look through fucking Instagram or TikTok, whatever platform you're on, and the For You and how extreme that can get of content and this kind of rabbit holes you can get taken down. There's an appetite for it. I think as you guys are adapting on the fly and you're putting your toes in different waters, you say, and you can tell where you want to submerge and, where you're done. And I think that adaptability is going to serve you well in the medium to long term, because if Germany goes as it's, stating that it's looking like it could go, there is going to be this renaissance, this desire of information. And the American market is so captured. Again, no offense to my friends in publishing in the American cannabis media, but it's so industry focused. It's so moving with the block. It's not representing the culture. It's not trying to create community, as you say. So again, I think that's something to be sort of celebrated. So yeah, again, well done.
Yeah, I mean, you raise an interesting point about Vice, because I know they get a lot of, they used to get a lot of stick, and I'm talking about the journalism and the individual contributors, not the management and that shit show. But I know it's quite easy to hate on Vice, but what they did, with drugs and broader journalism, they really opened up what was possible in terms of publishing content online and reaching audiences, not just talking about drugs, kind of talking about, especially in the early days, Vice would cover conflicts that people didn't know about, that you wouldn't hear about on, the BBC or Sky News and things like that. Mm-hmm. They would cover, they gave a huge platform to LGBTQ writers who couldn't get their foot in the door of established media and things like that. And, it's funny because it's very hard not to talk about kind of what we do and what we aspire to do without kind of, mentioning Vice. And we don't want to be Vice, but, we do feel like they did open up a bit of a pathway for people like us.
We've definitely enjoyed Vice.
I've loved some of the things I've done by Vice. I think they've done an enormous service to making journalism more accessible to not just to writers but to people. Not everyone wants to read a stuffy formal Guardian article to learn about something that they know or they need to know. But it's sad that they've gone. But yeah, in a sort of kind of sad way, it does kind of open up a little bit of a space for us to kind of maybe cover more broader subjects that kind of overlap with the core of cannabis and psychedelics, like culture and just alternative wellness, not just kind of like woo stuff, but, kind of people are really buying into, things like adaptogens and mushrooms and, kind of functional mushrooms specifically, and, kind of like, different ways of managing their health, things like, the kind of the bit bro science, but, kind of like ice baths and Wim Hof breathing, and meditation and yoga and all of these kind of things, they all overlap. And yeah, unfortunate for Vice and the people that write for it, but kind of, we are looking at that and thinking, well, people do want that content. And, there's a gap to fill it.
We need to help people.
Yeah. People need to educate, people want the information from sources they can trust. And hopefully we can kind of fill in a few of the gaps that Vice leaves behind.
Mm. Yeah, I think, as you say, one of the things that Vice did so well was covering the spaces where the spotlights of society's attention overlap in that Venn diagram. Yeah. And so it wasn't just covering, this is an LGBTQ thing, this is them, that plus conflict or plus drugs or plus social environmental issues. There was always an angle of multiple different demographics and the crossover between. And I think that was so important because it naturally draws unity. It shows that people from disparate communities and activists and sort of advocates of different movements can share that synergy in that space. And I think that's something that we see, unfortunately, again, not to diss the American sort of media, but it's very captured, like you say, that it's very sort of almost, I use the term hippy dippy, and I say this with love. Like, I consider myself to be quite hippy dippy in various times. You know, I barefoot in the woods and sleep under trees and take drugs by fire. I'm very quite hippy dippy. But they've kind of gone one way, and we're hemp and we're spiritual and we're whatever, and we don't talk about skunk and drugs, and do you know what I mean? And then there's people who've gone, no, we're health and wellness. And so, yeah, we don't talk about THC, you know, we're because of like WADA and rules like that. And see, I mean, they're getting, cannabis is getting torn apart, psychedelics getting torn apart and put into these narrow, pre-ordained avenues. And then they're only allowed to be spoke of in relation to that. There isn't that intersectionality. So again, it's why sites like yourself, you know, are so important to create that space for, especially, as you say, cultural representation, the actual lived and living experience of these people to comment it. It's not just, oh, I'm an accredited journalist, I'm going to go into this space, because they won't understand it. They won't get it. They're not their class, not their background, not their experience. It's, as you say, it's to create and highlight a space to champion the growth of the creative people in these spaces, because if there's nothing else, we have an overabundance of creative people in the drug space. We just need, like I say, outlets.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And like you say, I think that kind of having that true representation is really important. It's something we've tried to do a bit of. I mean, you know, kind of one of the visions we've had for Leafie since sort of, you know, day one was kind of trying to cover, especially things like cannabis, from a broader angle, and maybe kind of like trying to diversify from that, especially media perceived or public perceived stereotype of what a cannabis consumer is or what a stoner is, if you want to, you know, kind of boil it down. You know, like there is always going to be a perceived impression of, oh, well, you know, they're a typical stoner. And, you know, like, so one of the things that we did very early on when we were hiring writers is, you know, to try and get more female voices on the website, because, you know, there are loads of bros writing about weed, you know, arguing on forums about, you know, whether 12-12 or 13-11 is the best light cycle, you know, living soil versus qualia and all that kind of thing. And there's you know, that space exists for that community, and those people are well catered for. But if you're like a, you know, a kind of a middle-aged or a, you know, a young woman who loves weed, but you don't really care about that side of it, there wasn't really a lot of space for those kind of people, but they exist in their droves, right? You know, like you look at America and, you know, in states post-legalization in Canada, like usually fastest growing sectors are like over 50s or, you know, kind of young Gen Z females. You know, the kind of consumption methods tend to spike are like edibles and drinks because they're accessible. And so, you know, we've always tried to make Leafie look and feel and be a space for those people who might love weed or might, you know, find great benefits from cannabis and its medicinal properties, or might be microdosing or using psychedelics for creativity or for anxiety or whatever, want to do these things, but then go to like what would be the traditional stoner out there and like feel like, well, this is for me.
Not feel massively included.
Yeah, because they don't see themselves represented on that side. So, you know, we obviously the stuff we write caters for that traditional community as well. And, you know, like they're a core part of our community and audience. But we've always tried to make
it like to bring people in.
Yeah, we want to bring people in. And I think that's really important for like
we don't buy
the arguments of legalization, right? You know, we don't need to convince.
Yeah, it's not just for stoners.
Yeah, we don't need to convince, you know, people who already smoke weed day in, day out that, you know, legalization needs to happen, because they're well on board with that. But, you know, there's plenty of people that could easily either be convinced or already on that same side, but they don't fit into that demographic. So if we can educate them and entertain them and get them on board with any kind of, you know, meaningful progress, you kind of create like a catalyst. And that's kind of, you know, that's something we've always wanted to do and we're doing more of now.
Yeah, exactly that. It's irrelevant how many outports you've got if you've only got a couple of imports. The filter of that system will naturally taint the intention and the quality of the product you're providing in the articles and the content. So I think, yeah, that's greatly important. I think it's something that is under highlighted, and it is still difficult in the space of the most of it. I mean, this ends up, I think I've done 20 episodes with dudes in a row now. It just kind of falls to this because of, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was very much a sausage fest. I'm wearing a fucking Fight Club t-shirt as well. Obviously, you know, this looks optically quite bad, but my comment stands in the States, as you say, they were always there. The women were always there. most of the people that we think of as big names, yeah, who do you think helped them in their gardens? Who do you think they went home to and spoke to about it for 17 hours? It was their missus. Do you know what I mean? It was, they helped intricately. There's a lot of female breeders as well that don't get the credit. You know, they'll do the work and then they'll go to a more established figure and they'll basically front it because the woman won't get the respect because of the underlying misogyny, which I think comes as a hangover of prohibition, when there was a danger of it. You know, if ultimately, not without getting sexist or misogynist, and I'm sorry if I do, I'll try and clarify my point as I go, but traditionally more women would be at home raising the kids. The men are then targeted because of then the system's perception. The courts don't want to send the women to prison with the kids. So if the house gets raided, the dude takes responsibility, the guy's gone. So you end up with the fathers removed from it. So the women end up often running supply and owning those lines while the guy's inside anyway. So they equally have this share to the market. But also just create a disproportionate thing that as legalization then kicks in, all the bros have got in their mind all this legacy and all this experience because they've been out and proud, whereas the women don't, because it wasn't safe for them. You know, it wasn't safe for your average woman and just go pick up 20 bags from a random dealer. Do you know what I mean? It's a different environment. There's so many different dynamics that have to go into their experience of the cannabis culture and space, both post and pre legalization, liberalization, whatever we want to sort of term it as. So I think, yeah, to have those voices, it's a lighthouse in darkness for the others that are still scared, especially in the UK where the law is still so brutal. Do you know what I mean? We like to think that we're soft touch, but dependent on your colour, your class, your creed, whatever your background, if you're in the wrong space with the wrong cop, you twin that with the wrong judge, you're fucked. It's an absurd state. So yeah, bringing genuine voices to the space, I think is hyper important, because there's so much. I'll say this as someone who runs a podcast, of the irony, echo chambers that are generated within the media space. And we all think, you know, we're patting each other on the back and going, yeah, we're doing real good here. So I think, as you said before about, you know, publishing what you want to see and what you want to read, I think that's a great philosophy to have. And by bringing on these other voices, as you say, that allows you to adapt and see their needs and their wants. So then you can widen your own scope. So I think it's just going to go from strength to strength, as I think it is and has thus far.